I could smell the lake before I saw it that morning, the crisp blend of mossy water, reeds, and old wooden docks soaked in dawn mist. The world was quiet except for the rippling lapping against the shore and the distant creak of a boat rope swaying on its mooring post. It was my favorite time of day, just me, my fishing rod, and the steady comfort of a place I'd spent countless hours with my granddad before he passed. I parked by the gravel pool-in next to Lot 14, where the new HOA signs had recently been hammered into the grass. Private HOA members only. They read in bold, arrogant letters. I ignored them. My grandfather built the little dock at the southeast edge of this lake before the HOA even existed. My dad used to say this water ran through our blood. And in moments like these, rod in hand, fog curling around my ankles, I believed him. I stepped out, breathing deep, savoring the cool dampness on my face. I set my thermos beside the tackle box and flicked the rod to test its line. That's when I saw her. Helen Walker, HOA president, standing 10 feet away on the newly paved path, arms folded tight across her bright pink tracksuit, even at dawn. She had a clipboard clutched to her chest like a weapon. "Out here early again, aren't you?" she said. Her voice carried across the silent water, slicing through the peace like a blade. "Morning to you too, Helen," I replied, forcing a polite smile as I hooked my bait. "Beautiful day to be out." Her thin lips twisted. "You know this dock isn't for public use. Only HOA-approved members can fish here. We've discussed this." I reeled in the empty hooks slowly, feeling my pulse tighten. This dock was here long before the HOA bought up those lots. I have every right to fish here. She raised an eyebrow with calculated cruelty. "Not according to our updated bylaws, and honestly..." She glanced down at her clipboard, flipping a page with theatrical slowness. "We've received complaints. People say your truck is an eyesore. The HOA board might fine you for parking." Here, my fingers clenched around the rod handle. This woman. She didn't care about community or safety. She cared about control. "If there's a problem, Helen, you can call the sheriff. You know I'm not trespassing." She smiled sweetly, eyes hard as granite. "Oh, I don't need to call anyone today." She turned, waving her hand in a clipped gesture. That's when I saw them, two landscaping guys in reflective vests walking towards the shore, each carrying 5-gallon white buckets. The smell hit before I realized what they were doing. Bleach, thick, acrid chlorine burned my nose as they tilted the buckets forward and began pouring streams of milky liquid directly into the shallows where my bobber used to dance. I stepped forward instinctively, rage exploding in my chest. "What the hell are you doing?" Helen didn't flinch. She watched the water foam, watched the bleach spread into swirling, cloudy tendrils that clung to the reeds and rocks. "We've had algae complaints. The board approved a cleansing treatment. It's perfectly legal." I could barely speak. My tongue felt thick, my breath strangled by fury. "You can't just pour industrial bleach into a natural lake. You'll kill everything in it, the fish, frogs, turtles. The birds that feed here. That's not my problem," she said with a shrug. "If you want to fish, buy a lot and pay your dues like everyone else. Until then, I suggest you leave before I write you up for harassment." The two workers emptied their buckets, avoiding my eyes, and retreated up the path. The lake shore foamed white where the bleach had sunk in. Already, minnows floated belly up in the shallows, and a small bullfrog flailed weakly at the surface, its green legs twitching as its lungs burned from the chemicals. Helen clicked her pen against the clipboard. "I'll be filing this encounter under HOA Incident Report number 3482. Goodbye." She turned away, her ponytail bouncing as she marched down the path. I stood there staring at the water, chest heaving, a silent scream trapped behind clenched teeth. The morning breeze shifted, carrying the acrid chlorine temps across the reeds. My eyes stung, but I refused to move. Tears burned hot as helplessness flooded through me. Granddad used to tell me, the lake always forgives, even when people don't. But as I watched dead fish bob between foam bubbles, I knew forgiveness wasn't enough. Not this time. They had destroyed something that could never be replaced, just to prove they could. The anger inside me calcified into resolve, quiet and sharp as a fishhook under my fingernail. I packed my rod into its case with trembling fingers, the plastic cool and smooth against my palms. My breath steadied as I closed the tackle box, staring out over the ruined shallows. The sun had begun its climb above the trees, slicing golden shards across the rippling, poisoned water. I wasn't done here. I would find a way to stop them, not just for me, but for every creature they'd killed today. For my grandfather, who built this dock with his bare hands so his family could fish here long after he was gone. As I walked back up the gravel path, I paused and looked over my shoulder. Helen was already striding away towards the HOA office on the hill, her clipboard swinging like a victory flag. I let a bitter smile curl my lips. She thought this was over. She thought she'd won, but a storm was coming for her. She just didn't know it yet. When I returned to the lake later that afternoon, the stench hit me before I even turned off the ignition. The familiar, earthy aroma of reeds and algae was gone, replaced by the sharp, burning stink of bleach mingled with decay. I stepped out of the truck and the heat slapped my face, carrying that chemical temps across the parking strip. A family with 2 kids stood on the path, staring at the water in silent horror. The father had his hand over his nose. The mother clutched her daughter's shoulders as the little girl whimpered, pointing at the dead fish floating near the reeds. My stomach twisted. Hundreds of sunfish and bass bobbed on the surface, their silver bellies gleaming under the afternoon sun. A turtle drifted upside down near the old tree roots. Even the insects seemed to have abandoned the shore. There was no buzz of dragonflies or hum of mosquitoes, just suffocating silence and the hot reek of chlorine death. I felt eyes on me and turned to see Helen Walker standing near the gate entrance, her arms folded and lips pressed into a smug smile. She wore a wide-brimmed sun hat now, as if this were some afternoon garden stroll. Her clipboard was gone, replaced by a cold iced teacup she sipped like royalty overlooking her conquered kingdom. Beautiful afternoon, isn't it? She called out, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. You killed everything. I said, my voice breaking despite my effort to keep it steady. You destroyed an entire ecosystem just because you didn't want people fishing here. She shrugged. Lightly, we had an algae bloom problem. The board approved a solution. You should be grateful, it's cleaner now. I stared at her, trying to comprehend the absence of remorse in her eyes. The little girl by the shore burst into tears as a bass floated close, its gills wide open like a silent scream. The mother scooped her up and shot me a sorrowful look. Before ushering her family away, I turned back to Helen. You're going to pay for this. There are federal protections for waterways, and you just dumped industrial chemicals into a public lake. Her smile widened, revealing bleached teeth that matched the dead water. Actually, it's not public anymore. The HOA purchased the surrounding lots and rights to manage it last year. Didn't you read the notices we mailed out? Of course not. People like you never read anything until it's too late. I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug half-moons into my palms. The urge to march over and scream in her face pulsed through every nerve in my body. But as I watched her sip iced tea, perfectly composed, I understood something. Rage alone wouldn't touch her. She thrived on it. She fed off helplessness. I forced myself to breathe. Calm, control. Strategy, Granddad always said. Don't swing until you know where they're weakest. I turned and walked back to my truck. Behind me, Helen laughed softly. the sound floating on the breeze like the high whistle of a hawk circling over a dying rabbit. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, legal pads strewn with scribbled notes. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages from neighbors. Photos flooded Facebook. The bleached shorelines, dead fish stacked like driftwood. A lone crane standing in the shallows with limp wings, its white feathers stained with gray scum. People were angry. Some were disgusted. But others defended the HOA. They're protecting our community's health standards that fishermen should stop trespassing. HOA is just keeping things clean. I scrolled through comments until the words blurred. My chest ached with a sick emptiness. I called the Environmental Protection Agency hotline and filed an emergency report. The woman on the line listened carefully, typing rapidly as I described what happened. They poured bleach. "Are you certain it was bleach, sir?" she asked. "I saw the buckets. I smelled it." "There's no question," she sighed. "We'll dispatch a field investigator within the week. Unfortunately, unless there's direct evidence of prohibited chemicals or endangered species damage, HOA chemical treatments fall under local jurisdiction." "Local jurisdiction," I repeated, stunned. "They killed everything in that lake." "I understand, sir, but they may have used an approved algicide. It depends on product registration and concentrations used. You'll need to contact your county water management office as well." I thanked her numbly and hung up. A week. By then, the lake would be a graveyard, churning under the summer sun. I called the county office next. The receptionist transferred me to an environmental officer, who sounded half asleep. "They used bleach?" he asked dully. "That's not an approved aquatic herbicide." "That's what I've been trying to tell people," I snapped. "Okay, sir. File a formal complaint with photos, dates, and witness statements. We'll investigate within 10 business days." 10 days. Another eternity. I thanked him tightly and hung up, staring at my yellow notepad. Names, numbers, codes, regulations scrawled in frantic slashes. None of it mattered fast enough. Meanwhile, Helen sat in her HOA office, sipping iced tea, planning her next neighborhood conquest. The next morning, a neighbor texted me a screenshot. HOA board update. Due to recent community complaints regarding algae control treatments, the board has approved additional chemical applications to ensure lake safety for members and pets. I nearly threw my phone across the room. They were doubling down. Ignoring the deaths, ignoring the ecological collapse, ignoring everyone except the homeowners clapping like seals at a seafood circus. I drove back to the lake at noon. The sun blazed overhead, baking the sour bleach stink deeper into the air. A news van was parked at the edge of the lot. 2 reporters stood near the waterline, filming dead fish bobbing in foam. I approached them, my chest thumping with cautious hope. "Are you covering this?" I asked, voice hoarse. The cameraman turned slightly. "Yeah, environmental contamination story. You know what happened here?" I took a breath, steadying my resolve. "Yeah, I saw them do it." Both reporters snapped their attention to me. Within minutes, I was giving a recorded statement on camera, describing exactly what I witnessed. Helen's smug smile, the landscaping workers pouring buckets of bleach, the minnows dying at my feet. As I spoke, my voice gained strength. The horror and fury boiled into purpose. "Do you have proof they used bleach?" the reporter asked. "Not physical proof, but I know what bleach smells like, and I have dozens of photos." "Check the buckets. They're probably still at their maintenance shed." "Thank you," she said, her eyes narrowing with focus. "We'll look into it." When I left, the news van stayed, interviewing the family I saw that morning. Neighbors gathered near the cameras, whispering, pointing at the lake, at the dead fish piling in ripples against the shore. The smell thickened under the afternoon heat. curling through the reeds like a living curse. As I drove away, my phone buzzed with a notification. The local news page had uploaded my interview. The thumbnail was me, standing by the dead fish, with the headline, "Lake Contamination or HOA Chemical Control Gone Wrong. Local Fisherman Speaks Out." I scrolled through the comments, watching them pour in. "They're killing our lake. HOA has too much power. Finally, someone is exposing them." I felt a cold ember ignite deep inside me. Helen thought she'd won. She thought she could bleach away problems like algae on a pool tile. But she didn't realize that this time she wasn't just facing a fisherman with a rod and tackle box. She was facing every person who ever loved that lake, every creature that once called it home. She was facing me, and I was done playing. By her rules, I closed the comments, my resolve hardening with each passing second. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. That night, sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Helen's smirk. The rippling bleach spreading through the water like liquid death, and the turtle floating upside down in silent agony. Around 2 in the morning, I finally gave up and poured myself a cup of black coffee. The bitterness jolted my senses back to razor focus. I opened my laptop and began compiling everything I had. Photos of the workers pouring bleach, screenshots of HOA posts bragging about chemical treatments, video clips of dead fish lapping against the dock supports. I uploaded them to a cloud folder, labeling each file with dates, times, and precise locations. By dawn, I'd organized it all into a neat digital dossier. I emailed it to the local EPA field office with a detailed formal complaint. Then I forwarded it to the County Water Management Authority, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the local environmental conservation nonprofit. I knew the HOA would try to argue they used an approved algazide, so I dug into public procurement records. Online, after an hour of searching invoices, I found their chemical purchase orders listed under maintenance expenses. My breath quickened as I read the vendor details. Bulk bleach supplier. Industrial grade. At 7 in the morning, I called the environmental officer I'd spoken to the day before. His voice sounded less groggy today, sharpened by the urgency. In mine, as I explained what I'd uncovered, "You're saying you have their purchase records proving it was bleach?" he asked, suddenly alert. "Yes, and videos showing them pouring it in. That changes things. We'll dispatch a hazardous materials inspection team today." I hung up, pulse thundering with adrenaline. The rising sun burned through my kitchen, blinds painting golden stripes across my cluttered table strewn with paperwork and legal pads. My phone buzzed with another notification. The news story from yesterday had gone viral. Local environmental groups were sharing it on Facebook, Instagram, and even TikTok. One video had over 600,000 views overnight. Comments poured in. "HOA poisoned a lake. Where's the EPA? This is criminal." As I scrolled, a name popped up: Jeff from Lake County Environmental Watch. We'd met years ago at a river cleanup event. His message was blunt. "I saw your interview. Let's talk. We're filing for an injunction." We spoke for an hour. Jeff was furious. They dumped bleach into a freshwater ecosystem without permits or environmental assessments. That's a felony-level violation under state law. We're pushing for an emergency injunction to suspend all HOA activities on the lake pending investigation. I felt my chest loosen for the first time in days. What can I do to help? Meet me at the county clerk's office this afternoon. Bring every shred of evidence you have. We're filing today. When I arrived at the county complex, Jeff stood near the stone steps, phone pressed to his ear as he paced. He was a broad-shouldered man with sun-darkened skin and a quick, clipped way of speaking that radiated urgency. He ended his call and turned to me with a grim nod. "Ready to shut these clowns down?" he asked. "More than ready," I said. Inside, we met with an environmental attorney from his nonprofit. She reviewed my files rapidly, eyes scanning each document, each time-stamped photo. "This is airtight," she muttered. "We're requesting an emergency cease and desist, full hazardous material assessment, and an ecological impact survey." She filed motions with the clerk. Jeff leaned towards me. "They thought you'd just walk away. They underestimated the wrong fisherman." When we exited, my phone buzzed again. Another text from a neighbor. "The HOA board is meeting right now at the clubhouse. Helen's telling everyone your claims are fake and slanderous." I felt a dark smile curve across my face. "Let's pay them a visit." Minutes later, we pulled into the clubhouse lot. Cars lined both sides of the drive, and clusters of homeowners milled around the manicured hedges, whispering in tense circles. Inside, the meeting hall buzzed with agitated voices. Helen stood at the podium in her crisp pink blazer, tapping the microphone as she addressed the crowd. "I assure you all, these environmental extremists are blowing things out of proportion," she said with an airy wave of her hand. "Our treatments were board-approved and fully within HOA guidelines. There is no legal issue here." I walked straight down the aisle, the room falling into stunned silence as people turned to watch. Helen's voice faltered as I approached. Jeff and the attorney right behind me. "Good morning, Helen," I said evenly. "I see you're busy spreading lies today." Her mouth tightened. "You have no business interrupting this meeting. This is private HOA." The attorney stepped forward, crisp black suit radiating authority. "My name is Sarah Evans, environmental counsel for Lake County Environmental Watch. This morning we filed an emergency injunction against your HOA's management of the lake pending investigation into hazardous chemical dumping. You are hereby ordered to cease all activity involving the lake effective immediately." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Helen's face went crimson, her lips parting soundlessly as she looked from me to Sarah to Jeff. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, but her voice trembled. "We have every right to maintain community water standards with Bleach." Jeff barked, his deep voice booming through the meeting hall. "You dumped industrial bleach into a freshwater ecosystem without permits, environmental assessments, or wildlife considerations. That's a felony violation under state and federal law." People began whispering furiously among themselves. Some homeowners glared at Helen. Others pulled out phones, filming every second. Sarah handed Helen an official copy of the court filing. "You are personally liable as acting board president and signatory on the purchase orders. I recommend you consult an attorney immediately." Helen's hands shook as she snatched the papers. Her eyes darted over the dense legal print, her chest rising and falling rapidly. This is slander. You're ruining this community with your lies." "No, Helen," I said softly. "You did that yourself." The tension in the room was electric. Outside the windows, the sun sparkled across the poisoned lake, beautiful and deadly under a cloudless sky. Neighbors shifted, whispers rising to urgent murmurs. A few began asking questions. Others crowded around Jeff and Sarah, demanding to know what would happen to their property values, whether their kids could get sick swimming there. Panic bloomed like a mushroom cloud. Helen's shoulders slumped as she clutched the paperwork. To her chest, her composure cracking in real time for all to see. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw fear in her eyes, not of me, but of the consequences she never thought would arrive. I turned and walked out of the hall, the attorney and Jeff beside me. Behind us, Helen's voice rose in desperation as she tried to regain control of the meeting. But the crowd was no longer listening. Her kingdom was crumbling brick by brick, exposed to the harsh light of justice in the parking lot. I paused, letting the summer wind wash over my sweat-slicked face. I breathed deep, feeling the bitterness in my chest begin to lift. This was far from over. But for the first time, hope flickered in my veins. Helen thought she was untouchable. She forgot that nature always finds balance. And sometimes, nature fights back. 3 days later, I stood at the edge of the dock, staring at the rippling water under a soft gray sky. The lake smelled different now, not of life, nor of bleach, but of stagnant emptiness. Fish carcasses had been removed by environmental cleanup teams, leaving only a ghostly silence that clung to the reeds. Yellow tape fluttered across the boat launch. Warning signs hammered into the gravel path. Closed by order of Lake County Environmental Protection Division. Behind me, engines rumbled as county trucks lined the narrow road, their hazard lights flashing amber in the dawn mist. Environmental officers in reflective vests moved along the shoreline, carrying metal sampling rods and water analysis kits. Cameras from the local news station tracked their every move, capturing each tube of murky water sealed and labeled for evidence. I watched them work, feeling a distant ache in my chest. This lake had always been a living thing to me, a sanctuary woven with memories of dawns spent fishing beside my grandfather, of quiet afternoons with my father teaching me how to tie fly knots and choose bait. Now, it felt like a battlefield. Scarred by arrogance, Mr. Hartley. I turned to see Sarah Evans, the environmental attorney, approaching with her tablet tucked under her arm. Her face was grave but calm, quiet confidence radiating from her every movement. "We just received word from the county prosecutor," she said. "They're moving forward with criminal charges, illegal chemical dumping, environmental destruction, and multiple counts of wildlife harm." A tight knot loosened in my gut. "Against Helen Walker personally." Sarah nodded. "Against her and the entire HOA board. But as the signatory and acting president, she faces the highest charges. Maximum penalties include fines exceeding $500,000, civil damages, and prison time." I exhaled slowly, feeling the cool morning air fill my lungs to the brim. Across the lot, Helen stood surrounded by sheriff's deputies and state environmental officers. Her pink blazer looked garish against the subdued khakis and greens of the enforcement team. Her face was pale, her hair pinned back too tightly, eyes darting from officer to officer as they read out her rights. I saw her lips move excuses, protests, desperate deflections, but the deputies remained unmoved. One officer turned her around and clicked cold steel cuffs onto her wrists. She gasped, her shoulders jerking as they locked shut. A crowd of neighbors had gathered near the tape line, filming on their phones, murmuring in hushed awe as their once untouchable queen was led towards the sheriff's SUV. She spotted me across the parking lot. For a moment, her gaze hardened into pure hatred. Then her eyes flickered to the deputies flanking her, and something inside her seemed to break. She lowered her head and allowed them to guide her forward. The doors closed with a hollow thunk that echoed across the silent lake. Jeff appeared at my side, his bearded face splitting into a fierce grin. "You see that?" Kay said, nodding at the SUV. "That's justice, brother. Pure and simple." "It's not enough," I said softly, staring out at the empty water. "This place is still dead." He clapped a calloused hand on my shoulder. "It's a start. The lake will recover. Might take months, might take years, but nature always fights its way back." I nodded, feeling tears sting the corners of my eyes. "Yeah," I whispered. "Granddad always said, the lake forgives, even when people don't." Behind us, environmental officers rolled out floating booms to contain the remaining contamination, while others set up oxygenating pumps to reintroduce dissolved air back into the deeper pockets. News reporters crowded the tape line, their microphones buzzing with updates for viewers tuning in to watch the HOA president's public disgrace. Across social media, Her mugshot was already trending with captions like HOA, Karen meets Karma, and "When you think you own nature, but nature owns you." I allowed myself a small smile at that later that afternoon. As I sat on the dock alone, feet dangling inches above the dim swirling water, a dragonfly landed beside me. Its wings shimmered blue and green in the muted sunlight, trembling as it cleaned its delicate legs. The first living creature I'd seen returned to these poisoned shallows. It perched there for a long moment before lifting off, buzzing across the ripples towards the reeds, vanishing into the shadows. I closed my eyes, feeling hope bloom quietly in my chest. Helen had thought power meant controlling people. But real power was protecting something that couldn't fight back, standing up for the voiceless even when the world told you to sit down. That was the legacy my grandfather left me, and I intended to live up to it every single day. When I rose to leave, I glanced back at the lake one last time. The yellow caution tape flapped in the afternoon breeze, snapping against its metal posts like warning flags. But beyond the tape, beneath the still water, life waited. It always did. The frogs would return. The minnows would hatch. The lake would breathe again. And when it did, I'd be here with my rod and thermos at dawn, casting lines into water, made sacred by its resilience. As I walked up the gravel path to my truck, the fading sun dipped low behind the trees, streaking the sky in amber and violet. My phone buzzed in my pocket with a text from Jeff. "Cleanup team starts full restoration tomorrow." EPA's bringing in biologists to design replanting and repopulation. I smiled, typing back one word: good. I turned the key in my ignition, feeling the engine rumble beneath me. As I drove away, dust curled in my rearview mirror, the lake receding into the shadows behind me. And I knew, without a single doubt, that I'd be back soon, because this was my lake, and no matter what arrogant tyrant tried to claim it, it would always belong to the creatures who called it home, and to the people willing to fight for its right to live free.